Hi, welcome to Financial Dilemmas. This is a podcast where we talk about real money decisions that women face, trying to move a little bit from that hesitation and anxiety space to confidence and decision making, which sets us up for the best for our fabulous financial futures. My name's Sam Seckham, and I'm a chartered financial planner, and I'm a Telegraph columnist and passionate advocate for women and finance. So today's story is one that so many women will relate to. Penny's recently sold a property, and after clearing some credit card debts, she's left with a lump sum of around 50,000. And it's a rare and exciting opportunity, but it also brings some surprising amounts of kind of pressure on us as women. So should she invest? Should she travel? Save? What are the choices here? And what does each one of them build for her future and do for her life? So I'm going to ask Penny to introduce herself. Thank you, Penny, for writing into us. And let us know a little bit about how this has happened, your story so far. Over to you, Penny.
Hi, yes, thank you for having me, Sam. When I got the email saying, would you like to submit a query, anything, I was like, yes, I'm absolutely going to do this. So I sold a property in October. I had purchased it in 2018, which, looking back, was a very smart move. But that wasn't the reason I was doing it at all. It just sort of happened quite organically. The property was in Manchester, and I lived up there for many, many years. But I am from the south, and I have moved back down south to be closer to friends and family. And initially, I was having friends rent the apartment from me, and then they all decided to buy their own properties. So I was faced with the decision: do I sell? Do I become a professional landlord? And after feeling into it, I decided I really didn't want to become a landlord. So I decided to sell the property. One of the other driving factors was I have always wanted to travel the world. It is an absolute dream of mine. And for, one reason or another, it just hasn't seemed to happen yet. You kind of just get sucked into daily life. So for me, it was about freeing up equity. And I did think about potentially taking some equity out the property, keeping the property on a buy-to-let, but I just didn't feel good about doing that. So I sold the property. It completed in October. And of course, now I'm left with this lump sum. And I'm not entirely sure how best to kind of invest it, put some towards travel, some towards investing in my future. So that's kind of where my quandary came from, really.
Well, thanks for explaining it. And there are a couple of things I'd just like to ask a little bit more about, if you wouldn't mind sharing. So when you were thinking about maybe keeping the flat and letting it out, and you said you decided you didn't want to be a landlord or a landlady.
Yeah.
What went through your mind? Why was that not something you wanted to be involved in?
So I feel like particularly the older generations, their view on life is that once you get on the property ladder, you don't come off. And so I had that kind of in the back of my head, and I was like, oh God, is this a really silly decision? I feel like I purchased slightly earlier than my peers. And so my friends are now all starting to make that step now. And there's me doing the complete opposite. So I was very aware that this was a huge decision. In terms of not wanting to be a landlord, so it's a 2-bedroom apartment within a block. So it has service charge. It's not freehold, it's leasehold. And year after year, that service charge was going up and up and up. And that's not something within my control. And it's not something that I can get back. So there was a nervousness, I guess, about the financial aspect of that cost increasing. There was also the worry or the concern of repairs and not being geographically located in Manchester anymore. And then there's the whole tax element. And I just had started to discover investing, and I'd started to see these sort of posts on social media and things like that. And it was comparing the rate of growth of owning property versus investments. And actually, when you take into consideration the interest rates, I was thinking maybe there is another way to kind of make this money work for me, but without all the stress. And especially if I wanted to go traveling, I just didn't want to have to think about a property.
So that sort of explains why you didn't do the equity release the property so as you could fund the travelling. I completely understand that if you've got an asset and it's grown in value and you want to spend some of that value to make, your life what you want it to be. I completely get that. And property is a bit tricky in terms of it's not very spendable. So you end up having to kind of remortgage or sell to release the equity. And I also completely hear you when you say if you want to go travelling, you don't necessarily want to be a landlady for a property in Manchester when you're on the other side of the world either. Although, I mean, you can pay agents, can't you, to do that stuff? Yeah. I hear varying accounts of how good they are, how much they charge, and that sort of stuff as well. So. Okay. And then you said about the tax elements as well. It is a fact, isn't it, that over the last 5 years or so, the government has systematically moved against landlords and landladies in terms of the tax breaks that used to be a common part of why owning property and letting it out was quite a cute investment move. And these days, there's not much tax advantage. In fact, the tax is quite tricky to manage because if you sell a property, it tends to all the capital gain turns up in 1 year, whereas if you've got your assets spread out over a number of things, you can sell them, sell one year and one the next year, but you can't sell the garage 1 year, the garden the next, the bedroom. It doesn't work with property. So so I hear you. I hear the concerns that you had, and they're all very legitimate. So I think you did a really good job of analysing your decision to sell ahead of actually doing it. So well done, you.
Thank you.
And I'm keen to hear a little bit more about this other stuff that you've been seeing on social media and what have you that kind of whetted your appetite a little into the alternatives that might be available. So what were you thinking in terms of potential investment opportunities? What's caught your attention?
Nothing sort of specific. It's just that as I kind of started progressing on this discovery basically of investing, and I was becoming more and more aware of I love the graphs that kind of show, if you start at 25, if you start at 35, if you start at 45, this is where you could get to. I think they're great. And so being 35 myself, I realized that I haven't been investing perhaps as young as I should have been. And so, this kind of lump sum feels a bit like a second chance in a way to kind of catch up a little bit. So I just started kind of delving into, what is investing? And there's so much jargon out there and so many acronyms. And it would take me forever just to read a paragraph. I was, what does that mean? Go back. Okay, read the sentence. Okay, now what does that mean? And eventually I was like, okay, I kind of have a grasp on this. And it's not as complicated as I think it's portrayed to be, which makes it very inaccessible. So I've kind of thought about stocks and shares ISAs. That's kind of where my head went to first. And to be honest, that's kind of all it's got to. When the money came through from my flat, I straight away put it in NS&I premium bonds.
We do love our premium bonds in the UK.
Because I just thought it's the safest place for it. And you never know, you could win. But I know it's not going to be, the best for the future in terms of growth and building that kind of, that compound interest. That's the kind of catchphrase I keep seeing everywhere. So
Yeah, and you're right. So those graphs you were talking about, like the younger you start, the more that compound interest that you just mentioned has a chance to work its magic. And it's getting interest on your interest year on year that really hikes up your returns. And the kind of message there is start as early as you can. So you said you're not you're 35 and you've not been an investor so far. But have you ever been in an auto-enrolment pension scheme, Penny?
Yes.
Okay, so you are an investor.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you are an investor. And I think just because sometimes something happens automatically as part of our employment doesn't change the fact that at that point we became an investor. And I'm really keen to encourage anybody who's in an auto-enrolment pension scheme to get hold of it and give it a big hug. Because it's going to be probably, if you do the right thing by your pensions, it's going to be worth more than your house when you get to retirement. So it deserves as much of our time and attention as we spend decorating our homes and choosing wallpaper and furniture, and we don't even know what our pension's invested in. It's like madness, really.
Yeah.
So we need to embrace the fact that we are investors when we're joined to an auto-enrolment pension scheme, and that pension scheme doesn't belong to our employer, it belongs to us.
Yeah.
It's our asset.
Yeah.
So well done for being in that scheme. And, think of yourself as an investor already. Maybe take a little bit more responsibility for what that scheme is invested in. Get a bit more familiar with it. Learn the jargon around pensions, because there's even more around pensions than there is around ISAs. So that's something to look forward to, isn't it?
Thanks.
So well done for being in a pension scheme.
Thank
and
you.
I do think that stocks and shares ISAs is probably your next move.
Okay.
There aren't many things that the government give us in the way of tax breaks, but pensions and ISAs are it, really.
Yeah.
So you need to be using those as your first port of call, so that any investing you do in those wrappers, we call them wrappers, tax wrappers, is tax exempt. So all the growth belongs to you and the tax man doesn't get to have a nibble on it.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's not in one of those wrappers, then you're always going to be sharing some of your returns with the tax man.
Okay.
Notice he's a tax man.
Yes. Of course.
I've villainised tax instantly by turning him into an avaricious bloke. But I do actually think that tax is it's the price we pay to belong to a civilised society. So, I'm not sure that I want to vilify tax at all. But we also have a responsibility to ourselves to pay only what we're due to pay, and to use the allowances that are given to us to encourage us to build our own financial security and well-being, without having to share that with the tax man. So, So so I think ISAs are a good choice, especially as you're already using pensions.
Okay.
The good news about ISA wrappers is they're available to us before we retire. So whatever we put in there, we can kind of get it back before retirement. You've already been a homeowner, so using a LISA probably isn't of interest to you, because it would only work for using it as a first-time buyer. I would suggest you're just looking at ordinary stocks and shares ISAs, as you say.
Okay.
Okay. So when it comes to what you're going to invest as opposed to what you're going to use to, because then let's not forget that ambition you had to travel the world.
Yeah.
And money is a tool. Money is a tool to give us a return on life.
Yeah.
So we deserve that. We deserve to be able to spend money without conscience or guilt.
Yeah.
Especially if we've also spent a bit of time going, okay, I'm not going to blow all of it. I'm going to keep some of it for later. I'm regularly saving into my pension. I'm going to set a little bit aside for later, because I've seen those graphs where if I do it in my 30s and I don't spend it until my 60s, it's gone up loads, So I want to dig in and do that, but I also want to be able to do this thing today, which will enhance my life. So how have you kind of gone about dividing the pot up into what I'm going to spend now and what I'm going to save for later?
So I would love to be able to do a year. I think I've got this thing in my head of it's kind of the gap year that I never took. So I've got this thing in my head. I would love to do a year. Based on the parts of the world that I'd like to travel to, primarily kind of going towards Asia and the East, it is a lot cheaper. But, middle of the road, kind of budget-wise, some Google searches and some ChatGPT researches have come back and said, you can spend anywhere between X and Y. So in my head, I think I would quite like to set aside 20,000 for the trip. If I don't spend it all, great. But if I do, then that's my upper limit, because then that leaves me with the 30 for the future. I need a little bit to come back to, probably to initially, live, and whilst I'm looking for work and things like that. So there needs to be a little bit that's more freely accessible. And then however much I decide to kind of lock away, I do not touch. There's also the question mark of the money that I set aside for the travel. I'm not going to be using it immediately. So, can I have that in a sort of medium investment where I can draw down on it whilst I'm traveling, but it's not completely just, dud money, so to speak. And then I have heard some advice, which I don't know what your thoughts on this would be, which is to buy or get a credit card and do your purchases interest rate free whilst you're traveling, and then pay it off when you get back. And I don't know whether there's much point if it's just a year, how much interest I could make in a year versus the interest on a credit. Do you know what I mean? So there's a few different things going on in my head.
Okay, so let's at least you're thinking about it and doing some research. So that's using tools like ChatGPT to kind of research your holiday budget and what have you. They're also very handy, those tools, for researching investment solutions. Don't always believe everything they say. That's you say you need to do a bit of like backup checking. Because of their capacity to make things up if they're not sure what the answer is. But, the research is definitely a guidance, isn't it? It kind of gives us like a framework to work in, and then we can back that up with a bit of our own checking. So you've got a budget for your holiday, and you've got a budget for your investing. And what we're doing now is we're thinking, right, okay, so this budget for saving, investing, we need to map that really to when we're going to use the money, because the number one criteria for what should I invest in today, Sam, is when do you want it back and in what shape? So do you want it back as a lump sum to maybe knock over a bill or a debt on a particular day in the future? Or is it, I'm not really sure when I'm going to use it, or whether I'm going to use it as an income supplement or as lump sums or just random ad hoc withdrawals. And I'm not going to start using it till maybe 5 years or 10 years, or, is it much more vague or is it quite specific?
Yeah.
If there's no discretion, so if you've got to have the money on that day to settle that contracted bill, then you've got to be very careful, because you don't know what the markets are going to be doing on that day. And there's no discretion to go, I'm not cashing that in right now. It's in a horrible place. I'm going to give it a couple of months and wait for it to recover, because you need to cash it in on that day. So the less discretion there is around how and when you access an investment in the future, the more caution you need to take about its capacity to fall in value short term.
Okay.
We call that capacity to fall in value often gets referred to as volatility. When you're talking about investments. So if you see something which says, volatility high, it means that it does pitch and trough a lot. And timing markets is impossible. And if you do run across an investment manager or guru who says that they've worked out how to do it, move on to somebody who admits that nobody knows. Because that's the truth of it. Nobody knows what the markets are going to do next or when. And if you try and predict that, you are going to be wrong a lot of the time. So that's not the way I would suggest you play it. But the markets they go up 75% of the time. And if you stay invested, you'll get a return. Unfortunately, it doesn't feel like that. So when I say the markets, stocks and shares are markets. So when we're talking about stocks and shares ISA, you would be in the markets. And they do go up most of the time. Unfortunately, the bit that gets reported on the news is the downward bits, not the upward bits. So if you just listen to news stories, it sounds like the only time the stock market is doing anything, it's going down. But actually, what they don't tell you is when it's going up, because that's normal. And news isn't about the normal. News is about the drama, the abnormal. So we get a lot of noise from the media about stock markets, which makes us believe that they go down more than they actually do. So it's worth bearing that in mind.
Okay.
And if you play the long game and you don't try and time when the market's high and low and buy and sell according to your timing, then you will get an average annual return from global markets well above inflation. And that is what you should be aiming for. Because the problem with leaving it in savings is it goes backwards in terms of its buying power. So whilst it never falls in terms of the headline capital value, the interest rate doesn't keep up with inflation. So when you come to spend it in 10 years' time, you buy less with it than if you spent it today. Well, that's no reward for saving. So what you're looking for is something that puts on weight greater than inflation, so as you can buy more with it. So you've actually have created some real growth and real returns over the longer term. And you can do that just by picking. I would suggest that the way that we diversify risk and the reason property is a bit of a fail on the diversification score is because when you own a property, it's one address in one town. And normally if you let it out, it's one tenant. So if anything goes wrong in that neighbourhood, if the sinkhole opens up and swallows your property, if your tenant goes rogue and just stops paying, everything you've got is affected by that decision. Whereas if you do the opposite and you invest in the global economy by tracking the world stock markets, you've got a little bit of everything everywhere in the world, in every currency, across every sector. So the chances of anything going wrong substantially enough to affect all of it everywhere, in every currency, in every country, in every sector, is really quite impossible to think of. You're talking about Armageddon. So that diversification protects you from what we call systemic risks. So risks that something could happen in one town, in one place, at one address is not going to affect a global portfolio. So that diversification is a really important part of investing as far as I'm concerned. And it's where property scores a big miss on most occasions. So I think probably having the money invested in stocks and shares in an ISA wrapper would be tax efficient. You can set yourself up a nice globally diversified portfolio. You can do it really inexpensively by tracking. So by passive investment instruments. And there are a number of portfolios out there that give you access to that sort of thing. HSBC have a range called the Global Strategic Range, and Vanguard have a range called Life Strategy, where you can choose how much volatility by introducing equity into the portfolio you want to have. So you would then map that to when you're going to want the money back. So if you were going to invest in one of these strategies, and there are lots more of them. Fidelity have one, I can't quite remember what theirs is called. Fidelity Consensus, but they've all got their own versions of these. And you can invest, and you can have like maybe half of it as equity, so in stock markets, stocks and shares, and half of it in what we call fixed interest securities. And those are less volatile, bit more predictable, less growth opportunity. Because I think what you need to do is convert the word risk in your head to opportunity. So if you lower the risk, you lower the opportunity. So,
makes sense.
You're accepting a lower expectation of results, but less volatility. So if you wanted to get this money back in 5 years' time and you wanted to be more sure that it's not going to be below what you paid in, you might do 50-50, 50% fixed interest, 50% equity. If you're certain you're not really going to touch this money for 10 or more years' time, you're going to want more equity in it. Because, even 80% equity, you're pretty sure after 10 years, you're going to be above your kind of starting point with some growth. But it is possible, if you've got a high equity portfolio, that it could fall. The last time we saw a really, really nasty fall was in the credit crunch, actually, 2008-9, around that area. And it took 8 years to come good again. That's quite a long time, isn't
Yeah.
it? When it did come good, it came good plus some.
Yeah.
And if you'd been in that portfolio now, you'd wonder what you were worrying about at the time. But if actually you were like, if you went in at the top, the first thing that happened was the credit crunch, and 5 years later, you still haven't made back what you paid in, you might be really hurting, especially if you need that money to do something with. So you need to kind of have a look at the length of time you've got and the amount of equity you're going to include.
Okay.
And it's not a bad rule of thumb to go, if I want it back within 4 years, 40% equity. If I want it back 5 years, 50% equity. 6 years, 60% equity. Not rocket science, but not a bad rule of thumb either.
Okay, yeah.
So as you're getting your best opportunity, but you're kind of managing your access risk in terms of volatility.
Okay.
The more discretion you've got about when you spend it. So if you got to your kind of year 6 and things weren't great, you might wait and cash it in year 7.
Yeah.
If you've got that discretion, then I think you can afford to be a bit more opportunistic with your investment choice. But if you really need the money to live on in 3 years' time, I would say don't invest it at all.
Okay.
Find the best interest rate you can find. Maybe lock it in for a year if you know you don't need it while you're traveling.
Yeah.
But don't invest it if you want it back within 3 years.
Okay.
Even 4 if you've got some discretion around whether you access it or not. But 5 years or more, it shouldn't be in cash.
Okay.
Leaving it in premium bonds or deposit accounts or building society accounts would be a mistake.
Okay.
If you're not going to need it for 5 years or more.
Okay.
That's kind of like the framework. So think about when you're going to need it back. Think about how much discretion you've got about whether you take it then or not, whether there are other things you could use, maybe as you've mentioned, credit cards. I think the idea of using credit cards, especially while you're traveling, is about consumer protection as much as anything.
Okay.
So if you buy things like a ticket using your credit card, there's a certain amount of consumer protection provided by your credit card company.
Okay.
And I think sometimes people value that.
Yeah.
I know that I relied on it. I hired a car on one occasion, and despite following all the instructions, they tried to say that I'd returned it damaged when I hadn't. And they tried to claim the excess that they'd put on my card, and the credit card company was really, really useful in helping me fight that and stop it.
Wow. Okay.
So, there is that element of it.
Yeah.
But, credit cards make money, and if they're not making money out of you as the borrower, they're making money out of the suppliers who allow you to buy using a credit card. So they're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So don't be fooled on that one.
Yeah.
And I think the danger about using a credit card as well, and this is very deliberate on their part, is credit card companies and like buy now, pay later, things like Klarna and other ones. They're all about disconnecting the pain of the purchase from the joy of the purchase. So they deliberately make it easy for you to do it in the spur of the moment, excitement, and enjoy that. And then the pain of actually paying for it is delayed to another day.
Yeah.
And it's a very deliberate way of operating, which is designed to make them profit.
Okay.
So you have to be psychologically resilient to their attempts if you're going to use it. And you have to use it very, very purposefully. And not get seduced by the ability to have more than perhaps you were thinking of, because it sounds as if you've got yourself organised with even the area you're travelling to is chosen for its cost.
Yes.
Your budget is quite specific.
Yeah.
So if you then start using things like credit cards, will that dilute your resolve to stay in budget? Would it allow you to push some costs into next year when you get back? And they're not stupid. That's exactly what they would hope to be able to do.
Okay.
So you have to be quite resilient to their game if you're gonna do that. But I do think you can get some serious consumer protection by using credit cards to make your travel purchases. So.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, so like thinking about using your wrappers, thinking about connecting your ambitions for the money to the best possible opportunity for growth. And a lot of that is about how long is it going to be invested?
Yeah.
And then choosing the equity content that's relevant really to the time frame that you're working with, converting the word risk to opportunity, especially when you're talking about a globally diversified passive portfolio. Because the chances of anything going wrong that is going to, going to damage everything in your portfolio all at once is very, very slim. We are literally talking Armageddon, for that to happen. So much less risky than being the landlady.
Yes.
Much less risky. So, bear that in mind, because I think you're right. I think you can get the same sort of returns, but without the concentration risk.
Yeah.
That you have as a landlady.
Yeah.
And of course, it's tax-free, whereas being the rental income and the capital growth on a property is not. It's taxable.
Yeah.
So I think you've got lots of chance to do great stuff with this money. What's the biggest anxiety around it, Penny?
I think the biggest anxiety is that I will make the wrong decision. I will lose all the money.
Okay.
Because as I said, I think I didn't knowingly purchase the property at the time thinking that this is what I would end up doing with it. It was a genuine, I was living in Manchester and was able to kind of buy my own place. And I didn't really think about the future of what that money was going to do. And now that I've just recently discovered investing and the power it can have and how much it can open up, like for me, I really value freedom.
Right.
And I want to be able to have that freedom in the future to potentially have a small passive income or a large passive income or, So I think the fear is when that money came into the bank, I mean, I'd never had a lump sum like that.
Right.
I've never seen my bank balance that big before. And even moving it across to the premium bonds, I was so concentrated on the screen. I was like, do not mess this
Don't
up.
Press the wrong button.
Someone else's account, for heaven's sake. So I think it's just, fear of losing it now. I've got it and now I have this knowledge and I know there is always an element of risk and you can't be afraid to lose. You have to have an element of loss and gain. But I guess it's, the biggest fear is kind of coming back from this trip and, I've lost all of the savings and, I'm going to have to start again in my mid-30s, which as I have now found out, I should have been investing 10, 15 years ago.
You were investing.
Yes, in my pension.
Yes.
Yeah.
So don't lose sight of that. You did start earlier. And you have been doing it in your pension. What you're talking about here is the lump sum, not getting it wrong.
Yes.
And don't try and catch up with it. Start from where you are.
Okay.
Acknowledge that you have been an investor. You've been paying into your pension, and that's a long-term play. And you've now got this lump sum, but you invested in a property.
Yeah.
And that property grew in value.
Yeah.
And then you sold that property and you've got the profits and you're now reinvesting the profits.
Yeah.
So, you are an investor, you are doing it.
Yeah.
Don't lose sight of that. Congratulations. So you start where you are now. Look at this kind of more medium term. So not the pension, which is the longer term, not the cash, which we've talked about. Don't put it in the market if you're going to spend it in 3 or 4 years, really. Okay. Look for the best interest rate you can get. Maybe committing it for a year on deposit so as you get a little uptick in your interest. But keep the money you're going to spend in cash, even though it will probably go backwards against inflation over 3 or 4 years. Invest the money that you're not going to use within 5 years, because it's a mistake to keep it in cash if you're not going to use it within 5 years. Use that ISA wrapper to keep it nice and tax-free. Stay globally diversified and think about how much equity is in there, because that's going to dictate how long it might take to recover if it does hit a troublesome part of the stock market.
Okay.
So I would suggest that those are probably my top tips for you. You're already thinking about what to do. You're giving it some serious consideration. You're giving each pound a purpose, whether it's your travelling, your freedom fund, whether it's your retirement and your security. Everything's got a purpose. I think that's really important. Don't forget to celebrate that you're a successful investor. I think that's important as well. And when you're travelling and enjoying spending the proceeds of your successful investment in property, congratulate yourself and enjoy it, because you've done well.
Thank you.
Start where you are. Don't try and catch up.
Yeah.
Because the past is gone.
Yeah.
Can't do anything about it. So let's start where we are. Let's make decisions today that serve us.
Yeah. Okay.
I really hope that was useful. I've enjoyed hearing your story.
It was so useful. Thank you. Honestly, absolutely invaluable. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. So Penny's decision shows us that smart decisions don't mean giving up enjoyment. You can still do both. And if you're sitting on a lump sum and you need some kind of clarity and certainty, think about what the purpose of the money is and how far away it is before you need access to it. And don't leave it in the bank. If you're not going to spend it in the next 5 years, it's a big mistake. I think the regulator's got a lot to answer for in terms of scaring us to death about being investors. We get these big warnings, capital at risk and what have you. But when our money's in the bank account, we don't get a big warning which says buying power at risk. So I think the advertising is weighted in the wrong way, and the risk of losing money by staying in cash is just as real. It's just as real. It's just the capital value doesn't go down. It's the spending power that gets damaged. So we need to be brave enough to become investors and celebrate the fact that we've become investors. So thank you very much for helping me to understand your dilemma, and for helping other ladies look into your situation and hear us talk about what's probably going to be the smartest ways to collect on the opportunity of being an investor for you.
Thank you so much, Sam.